Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. So, good evening to our audience. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dr. Nasser Hussain, and I'll be guiding you through today's webinar, which is a deep dive and a focus on the topic of pornography. Now, my name is Dr. Nasser Hussain, and I have a specialty in liver medicine. So I have a background in dealing with people who have issues with addiction, but in particular, alcohol addiction. But when you work with people, you find that addictions are similar across the board. There's things that are shared amongst them. And although alcohol in this society is easy to talk about, well recognized, something that we don't talk about so much is pornography. And we're truly blessed to be in the presence of two experts who will help facilitate today's discussion. One of our guests is Sister Abida Ahmed. She's got a master's degree in development studies and English literature. She's a relate counselor and also a relationship therapist. She has a specialism in psychosexual issues, and she works with Muslims in particular who struggle with sex and pornography addiction. She's also the founder of Amana Counseling, a dedicated service to help our brothers and sisters in an issue that is oft not spoken about. We're also blessed to be in the presence of Counsellor Imran Khan, a mental health counsellor with a background in chartered accountancy. Imran specializes in psychosynthesis counseling, and he uses Islamic approaches as well as Western approaches to help his clients. Sister Abida, Imran, welcome.
Exactly.
Now, what we're going to do is open the floor to this discussion, but I'd want to start, if you don't mind, Sister Abida, to tell me a little bit about your background, Amana Counseling, and what rose or brought your interest into this area, if you don't mind.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Nasir. Jazakallah khair, Imran, for having me. It's always a privilege to be invited to these platforms where people like yourself are choosing to bring topics that are difficult and hard for our communities to address. So I really appreciate the opportunity. With regards to my background, as you said, I'm by trade a relationship therapist. So I qualified about 25 years ago now. And very early on into my clinical practice, I realized that for us Muslims, although our issues were the same, but there were very few spaces available where we could go and really bring our issues to those spaces, because the clinicians were not equipped to have the spiritual lens or the cultural lens. So in terms of diversity, wasn't back in the days a big thing. So Alhamdulillah, Allah gave me the opportunity to set my own private practice, which I've been running for, I would say, the last 12, 15 years now, Alhamdulillah. And in my private practice, I tend to just work with our within the Muslim community. And as you said, I specialize in psychosexual issues. So couples who have intimacy issues, as we know that a lot of intimacy issues can be, alhamdulillah, resolved through talking therapies, which is a big blessing. But at the same time, I have a specialism in addiction. Unlike yourself, I specialize in pornography and sex addiction. And with that, subhanallah, I've noticed that over the years, this is becoming a bigger problem in our community. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed me to be able to, put in my contribution where I can. May Allah accept it, inshallah.
MashaAllah. Sister Abida, you raised some really, really interesting points there. And I like a few aspects of what you've just said. You talked about an issue that exists in our community, and you touched on how these issues can be solved. And I'd like to talk about that further, if Imran, if you don't mind sharing the slides that we have, because I think sometimes people feel like this cannot be fixed. But before we carry on, Imran, you're one of my colleagues, a self-development instructor from Wiselife Academy. And I guess my question to you is, why is this an area of interest for Wiselife Academy, and what does Wiselife Academy do?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dr. Nasser. So, those who may be joining us, welcome. It's great to have you. And some may be familiar with what Wiselife Academy does, others may not. In a nutshell, really, what we're looking to do is taking what we almost take for granted in terms of our Islamic system, our knowledge, everything that we can say that we should be benefiting from, but for one reason or another, people may be sort of struggling in their day-to-days, genuine everyday challenges, right? And the answers are there, but how do we sort of bring them to make them relevant for you, right? So it's almost sort of taking divine knowledge and wisdom and applying it to your life so that you can actually have the solutions you need at your fingertips to make change possible. That's it in a nutshell. And I'll be honest, this topic around pornography, right? Let's just name it. It's almost sort of, it's quite jarring, it's that sort of taboo that hardly anyone tends to be comfortable talking about. I won't necessarily say hardly talks about, because more and more conversation springing up around it. The age we're entering into, we've gone through sort of the advent of social media, we're entering into the advent of AI. Things are changing, right? Demographics, the way people consume content is changing. The impact on our brains is changing, right? And if we're not aware of it and we don't know what solutions are available, particularly within our tradition, right, our sort of grounded, particularly our faith-based Islamic tradition, that we may run the risk of running into challenges that we think are insurmountable, unsolvable. But really, again, sort of in the basic principles, it's just about having a way, trainers who are specialized in, in our various fields to be able to synthesize the knowledge that we carry, frame it in an Islamic context, and provide what we need to hear. So this topic in particular, I always think of it as almost like a ticking time bomb. Regardless of what generation you come from, there's a degree of exposure we've all sort of seen and heard. And it just feels like it's getting worse and worse, scarier and scarier, right? But doesn't need to be. Particularly when there's taboos around it. I mean, the title of today was also like a compassionate approach. So where might that be relevant, and how might that support either ourselves or our loved ones that are challenging? So hopefully we can touch on some of that today.
So perfect. We've got an issue that needs to be addressed, and we've got two experts that can help us, inshallah, address it. But I'm going to be honest to our audience. This isn't something that a 1 hour webinar is going to fix. But I hope and we pray that it's the starting ground. It needs to be something that we talk about more openly in a education and a healing way. It needs to be a discussion that husbands can have with their wives, parents can have with their children, and our imams can have with their congregation. It needs to be spoken about. But this webinar is just there to have that conversation and get an idea of tips and strategies that may help. What we aim to do here at Wiselife Academy is give people more than just a webinar, and hopefully some real skills and life-changing approaches to this issue. And one of the things I just want to mention at the start is, if any of these issues resonate with anyone, we have a dedicated 1-day workshop where we will be tackling this issue, taking a deep dive, asking people to be able to understand and open up deeply about the addiction that they have, the impact it has on their body, their mind, their spirit, and also look at real solutions to get themselves out of this issue. So please, we'll share this QR code later, but if it's something you're interested in, we are hosting a workshop this Saturday, or the last Saturday of this month, 21st of June, in central London. And inshallah, it's something we hope to bring across the country. So something that we're going to focus on, we've got some learning objectives and an overarching idea of what we want to cover today. And I just want to start by putting the definition out there. What is pornography? It's explicit material, and it's intended to elicit sexual arousal, cause sexual desire, and people can want to or use this material to achieve sexual satisfaction. And that satisfaction fraction can be through videos, images, written content. And if we're honest with ourselves, it's widely accessible, from the most extreme to what people call soft porn. And it's something that we cannot escape in the society that we live in today. So not talking about it really shouldn't be an issue. But is it a Muslim issue? These are some statistics that came from a survey done in Britain and in Canada. And I was quite starkly surprised at the numbers, because you'd think this is probably a Western issue. You would think that maybe it's not a non-Islamic issue. But in the world we live in nowadays, it isn't. And I want to ask you, Sister Abida, is this something that resonates with you, or are these exaggerated figures? And in particular, Sister Abida, 53% of those who consume pornography that are Muslim talk about not feeling comfortable seeking help. I mean, I can imagine that's a barrier, or is it?
Jazakallah khair. I mean, you said it yourself. You know that in your clinics, and definitely in my clinic, the presentation that we have, the queries that I especially have, I get queries from all across the globe, from New Zealand to Australia to Middle East to Malaysia, from Pakistan, from Saudi, and that is because this is not a Western issue, and this is definitely a Muslim issue as well. I think this is a human issue. I don't think we should define it otherwise, because it becomes quite problematic when we say it cannot be a Muslim issue. Actually, we are making the stigma bigger, really. So we need to give people the permission that this is a human issue. Again, it's a psychological issue. It's a brain disorder. It's not really a spiritual issue. And I think we can talk about this a little bit more. Now, in terms of people finding difficult to come forward, one of the biggest barriers is exactly that people feel ashamed because anything that is explicit sexually, for us Muslims, the way we are, Islam promotes modesty and all that. So for people, shame and embarrassment is the biggest hurdle. And that could be for all addictions. But obviously, because with this, it feels like this is more of a choice. And I think that is the biggest problem, because when it comes to alcohol, for instance, people would very quickly know that there is that dependency element. So people won't necessarily judge an alcoholic, and they would say that, this person is not well and they need an intervention. But when it comes to pornography, and this is what I see a lot in my clinic, for instance, the wife will take weeks to get to that realization that my husband is not making a choice. There is that dependency element. So they will say, no, definitely there's something wrong with me. There's a problem in our relationship. And it takes a lot of psychoeducation for them to realize, well, actually, this is not about them, to create that separation, that this is a issue that this person has, and it's a brain disease. That's my approach in my clinic.
And Imran, if I can bring you in, I mean, is this something that we're missing? I can imagine if people aren't comfortable, those that are eventually comfortable seeking help, it's probably got to an extreme level. They probably find that they've got no other choice. Is this something that we should be encouraging early on? What are your strategies or your tips?
Yeah, so just to sort of building on what Sister Abida is saying there, and I think sometimes the narratives we tell ourselves, particularly, if we take one step back, parking the sort of Muslim view or teachings, etc., like we live in a society where we are constantly surrounded by sexualized imagery to the point that it's normal, right? Like, as in, it's part of advertising, it's part of fashion, it's part of movies that we might, TV that we consume, right? Like, as in, an odd scene pops up and we kind of feel a bit awkward or whatever, but then we're just like, or we may just be tuned out to it. Like, just notice where you are yourselves, right? Sometimes particularly in the case of where it gets out of control, right, where it's having a negative impact on your life, it's important to look at the narratives we tell ourselves, right? So there's the societal narrative that, this is okay, or it's the same thing with regards to alcohol, for instance, right? They say most of society, the people who drink, will say that yeah, it's fine, it's harmless in small quantities, right? And we should be mindful if we have a subconscious narrative that where we're consuming, well, we may be consuming pornography, and we're sort of subconsciously telling ourselves these narratives, and we kind of think we've got a handle on it. But again, where and particularly in the Muslim context, we don't talk about it so much. It's a bit of a taboo. It sort of comes to the forefront when it's at crisis point, right? Like things are spiraled out of control. Either relationships are being threatened, or people can't even get up to go work, or they're taking sick days, right? Because they're just so hooked, or they need to get the next fix, right? Like or they're engaging in risky behavior, right? Like moving from screens to actual in-person encounters, right? It's like
sorry, man, just
go for it.
just touching on what you're leading onto. It sounds to me, if that's happening, it's probably got to quite an extreme stage, right? But really, the question a person might ask is consuming pornography really that harmful? Are you really harming anyone? I mean, if people are getting some sort of sexual gratification, what is the harm? What impact is that really going to have? Are we just making a big deal about something that somebody is just exercising their free choice to do? Sister Abida Imran, please share your thoughts.
I think that's a fair question because sorry, Imran, did you want to
go for it? No, I was going to say, go for it.
Jazakallah khair. So in the society that we live, obviously there's freedom of expression, and people do say that pornography is a genre, and people are actually, in my training as a psychosexual therapist, there would be obviously I had to adapt my own way of working with my Muslim clients, but the Western model of even psychosexual work, there would be encouragement for couples to use pornography as a genre to improve their intimacy, for instance. Now, for us, the paradigm shift is that as Muslims, we recognize that within the bounds of Sharia, there are things that are problematic. And this is one of those things that we know that when we talk about the zina of the eyes, we know that pornography falls in that category. Now, that's just, obviously, I'm not here as a religious kind of person telling people what to do or not to do. But the reality is that for most people, when we screen them for addiction, obviously as an addiction therapist, you might know that we have a screening tool, and the same applies for pornography addiction, that there would be people on this side where they're making a choice, and each to their own, between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who are we to judge? And then there's a spectrum goes on to a place where it doesn't remain what you want, it becomes what you need, and the dependency element is so high that, as you were saying, Imran, people are struggling to get up, and they're really, so in terms of the harms, obviously we know, and Imran, you do this in terms of all addictions, so you know that there are obviously psychological harms, there are mental harms in terms of people's capacity to perform, relationship harms. So definitely, I mean, there's absolutely no way we can normalize it, especially when it becomes a dependency element, because it's a faulty coping strategy. And with a key thing with pornography or sex addiction, is more so with pornography addiction, is that because it's anonymous, because it's free, and because nobody will know, on your phone you could be doing whatever, and then nobody will notice. And that's why this one is the most lethal one as far as I'm concerned, because you can go unnoticed. I mean, nobody will know. The three of us here, Allah knows, we might have an issue, but nobody can tell, because with other things, if there's drugs or alcohol, people will notice, people around you will notice. And that's why this one is very, very problematic, unfortunately.
And I was just, the way you described that, Abida, that spectrum, because people think, they don't tend to see pornography as a drug, but when you talk about alcohol, cocaine, substances, they don't realize that the consumption and the repeated consumption of pornography has the same neuropsychological impacts on the brain. It is deriving a pleasure response that if it's repeated, the body becomes desensitized and there's an urge to look for more or increase your frequency, increase the amount or the type of material look to get that hit, to the point where there's such a high balance of what people want. Going without leaves them feeling low, feeling depressed, feeling withdrawn, that they need or get to a stage where they need the pornography just to feel normal. And Imran, what I'd like you to do, if you can just share the slides again, I want you to touch on some of these impacts that we see. And this is just one area of the impact of pornography, especially when it's repeated use. I mean, Imran, please do share your thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean, look, these are again sort of we're just painting the picture, right? Those who are viewing or who are watching this later, who maybe think, look, you may or may not be aware of these things, right? But it's always helpful, just kind of, what are we dealing with here, right? For me, when I look at this, look, you know, some of these things are almost sort of kind of the first stage. You know, if you're noticing, for example, and you may be consuming, or you may know someone who's sort of struggling with this type of consumption, it's kind of like sort of early warning signs, but sort of also what may come, right? So for example, I read it like desensitization, for instance, right? Like as in the concept that and this is kind of linked to neurological wiring, where initially it's a very recognized component of drug taking, right? Where your first hit or your first high, you'll never quite reach that, so you have to go for a harder hit each time, right? And your neurological system sort of wires itself to look for that hit, that fix, right? Why is it called a fix, right? Because we feel, usually we feel like a discomfort, we want to self-soothe, right? So we go to addictions to help do that, right? So like Sister Abida mentioned, I'm sort of talking from a generalist perspective with regards to any type of addiction, right? But specifically with pornography, the danger is, and I kind of pointed towards it earlier, that the desensitization could be like a downward slope, right? Like a snowball is getting bigger and bigger. You think you've got it under control. You're starting with just viewing stuff online, or it's free, so who's hurting? It's my sort of creature comfort, my thing nobody talks about. And then, you know, because your brain is looking for the higher and higher hits, you kind of may move on to, first of all, like more extreme sort of content, right? Like as in, and there's some really out there ones, right? You may sort of go sort of harder and harder. You may find your own sexuality sort of almost being like sort of commandeered, right? Your understanding, your views on what's healthy sexuality, your views on like what you're even attracted to could start to get warped, right? Because you're kind of like, why is this not doing the same thing? That could then progress to riskier behavior that I pointed towards earlier, right? Because your brain is just like a machine. It's just trying to self-regulate, and it's being overloaded. So that I read that as quite a scary one, right? If we think that, okay, now I've got it under control, but who's to say? And particularly if this has been the case for like tens of years, right? Like, what's to say, like, that you'll be able to carry on like this, managing it. So it's really key to sort of get a handle on it. And those who have escalated, right, they've seen the riskier behavior, they've seen the impact on their work and relationships. It's not a great place to be. It feels like a really dark, harrowing place to be. But just like Sister Abida mentioned as well, you know, sometimes that narrative we tell ourselves that I'm not a good Muslim, I'm a horrible Muslim, I'm not afraid of Allah, I'm just doing whatever, I don't even, you know, I can't help it. That's almost like it's like a somewhat self-fulfilling prophecy, because it kind of keeps us in a dark hole, right? It keeps us from requesting help.
Yeah,
Yeah,
keeps you hating yourself. Just on that, man, because you led quite nicely into some of these psychological impacts, and I think that makes people appreciate the mental health impacts that then to be related to addiction. So you're almost saying, once in an Islamic perspective, you probably feel like you're a sinner, you're not worthy of Allah. I can imagine it probably takes people away from prayer probably disconnects them from Allah completely. Sorry, Imran.
Now, there's something that I really want to say about that. I'd be curious about both your views on this, but like, like if we just look at stereotypical, oh, that person's a porn addict, this person's a whatever addict, right? Society normally takes a really harsh view on those individuals, like, oh, they're just bad people. They can't control themselves. They don't care about their family. They don't care about their jobs. They don't care about their kids or their partners, etc. It's quite a harsh narrative. It's almost like beat it out of them. Like if I say it hard enough, I'm going to beat it out of you. But that rarely works, right? Just like I said, a person's already in a dark place. They've told themselves a narrative where I'm a bad person, a narrative that's kind of keeping them in that dark place, preventing them from seeking help. Everyone's going to run away from me if they know this deep, dark secret of mine, which, funny enough, most people are probably dealing with anyway. But really, again, compassion, right? The headline of this, there's so much healing in just being compassionate, knowing that these, you're not a bad person, right? You're a person created by Allah with a bad habit, but you're not a bad person. That's really important to differentiate between who you are and what you've what's latched onto you, so to speak. And it also empowers you because you're also able to, you have then a model, a framework how to deal with it. That you're not a bad person, so but you have potential to deal with it. And of course, like the risk of not framing this properly is that it leads to anxiety, depression, stress. People may think that Islam can't help me. It's one of the reasons I actually went into counseling, because I thought, you know what, I don't want people to be in a situation where they think Islam can't help me. I'm so far gone that I've spoken to all the imams, nothing's working. Usually when we lead it with compassion, which is an Islamic principles, it's there in 113 out of 114 surahs. Allah introduces himself through his characteristic of mercy, right?
Imran, I'm just going to pause you there because you bring up some really key aspects, and I would like to get you to dive into those for us, because it's almost the second half of this webinar. We want to aim on, at giving our listeners or people who are suffering with this type of problem some sort of solutions, giving them a mindset, something to think about, and you're leading into that very nicely. But just before we do that, Imran, one last thing I wanted to bring in, because we've talked about the harm that this can have on the person. And Sister Abida, you'll be useful here because I noticed that the work you do is relationship counseling. So it's not just the person. And it sounds like there's a lot of couple therapy and couple work required. And this next slide just resonated with me about the impact it has on partners or other people in the relationship. If you can just help expand on that for us, Sister Abida. Is this just a one-person issue and it's just my problem, or does it have a wider impact?
I mean, with any addiction, it can't be a problem in isolation. And especially with sex and pornography addiction, at some point, these people, when they're young, obviously, it's an isolated thing, especially with young students, because accessibility and the fact that it's free, and with the internet and all that, it can be a problem in isolation. But at some point, when people come into relationships, we realize that this is their way of coping with stress or any type of life challenges. This is their go-to drug to navigate through the difficulties. Now, before I come to this, I think one of the things that I wanted to add on to what Imran was saying is that definitely the concept of using compassion or mercy or having a compassionate way of dealing with this, because people are ridden by shame and they feel that people would reject them. So we need to have that compassion. But the reality is that in my clinical experience, 95%, if not more, clients that I've worked with over the last many years would be people who would have trauma from their early years. So most of these people would have either childhood sexual abuse that they've endured. They've been in households where they've witnessed domestic violence, abuse, or bullying at school, or some sort of trauma, which meant that they were vulnerable in the sense that they would gravitate towards finding a tool that would balance their brain chemistry. So as you were saying, Dr. Nas, in the beginning, that this is the common denominator with all addictions is that we want to latch on to some reward or something that balances our brain chemistry. So for people, when especially in relationships, when there is too much cortisol, they would then want to, because they don't have any good ways of dealing with their cortisol, that they then go on to pornography, which is not something that for most people, it doesn't start in the relationship. So a lot of people say, oh, maybe, and the blame kind of onto the spouse that we don't have intimacy enough. So what can I do? I have high libido, so I have to go towards pornography. But then that's a psychoeducation that no, there is healthy sexuality, your needs, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you that framework. But when it's excessive, then it becomes a problem, right? So in terms of, as you were saying, as to what happens in the relationships, then the key thing is that one of the things that I see becomes a big problem is that in terms of not mismatched libidos, because that kind of is a myth. So in the couple of sessions, you kind of really talk about this is not a libido issue. You don't want more intimacy, actually. You want to soothe and distract yourself. And this is something else. And then the treatment goes to a different trajectory. But in terms of a healthy relationship, now we know that relationships are not just about especially marital relationships, is never just about intimacy. It's about trust. It's about respect. It's about friendship. It's about kind of really respecting each other. All those things. It's about responsibility. Now, when we think about the marriage, the model that I normally have for marriage is that there is commitment at the top. Then there's the emotional connection and there's the physical connection, right? So we cannot have anything physical unless we have emotional safety or we have commitment. Islam is clear about that. So there is a lot of distortion, especially for young people when they are exposed to pornography very young. Then they have no sexual education. They don't understand what's permissible, what's not permissible. They have unrealistic expectations from what they want from their spouses. So as a result, unfortunately, there is rape within marriage, which is very, very common. And young people have absolutely no idea, what does healthy sexual expression look like, because it's all distorted for them. And then that in itself brings up so many problems in the relationships, unfortunately.
I mean, Sister Abida, from what yourself and Imran have said, this is quite a deep and uncomfortable situation and a real struggle I can imagine a person suffers with. This idea that somebody is just committing a sin, they need to stop committing the sin, they need to just go pray more, certainly doesn't seem to fit this scenario. We're talking about a neurochemical change in the brain. We're talking about a real this childhood trauma thing that makes one want to be more compassionate rather than that judgmental, you've got a problem, you need to sort it out. So if we've got a listener now who's engaged or consuming pornography, who's probably doing it in isolation and hidden away, but they don't want to talk to anyone, nobody really knows, and they're just dealing with it by themselves. If I can ask you, Imran and Sister Abida, what's the first thing or what's the main message you want to get to that person?
Sorry, am I going first?
Go for it, maybe.
Yeah.
Abida, yeah.
Imran, I thought you froze for a second there.
My camera's frozen, but I'm still here, so all good.
I think for us as Muslims, we understand whenever there's shame, I think that's a red flag, because that's when shaitan gets to us, really. So shaitan wants us to just be in a state of despair and disappointment, and all of that leads to loneliness and exclusion. So there is exclusion that we give ourselves because we internalize in our core, we feel like we're not worthy and there's no redemption for us. So I think the first thing that I would say to anybody is, as Imran was saying, that we recognize that as people we are not faulty. You know, we might have faulty behaviors because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made us ashraful makhluqat, which means that in our DNA we're lofty creatures. So there is a lot of potential in each one of us, really. So it's kind of recognizing that where we have to remove shame. And removing shame is the first step. I think that's the biggest step. So when the person kind of takes responsibility that I need to seek help, and the way we seek help is Nasser, is like with anything, you know, if I have diabetes, if I have, God forbid, you know, hypertension or anything really, or if I have depression or anything, I would want to be proactive and take responsibility for my own healing. And I think the same goes with these maladaptive behaviors and coping strategies as well, that we need to take responsibility and seek help. And alhamdulillah, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised that if you knock on the door will open. And that's Allah's promise, because who are we to heal anybody or whatever? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide ways, and there's ample help out there. That's important to recognize.
If you walk or take a step towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will come running towards you.
Indeed, inshallah.
And Imran, yourself, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's people listening who say, this is me now. I am an addict. That's who I've become. I've tried, I've stopped, I don't want to. I wake up in the morning telling myself I'm not going to do it today, but then it just comes in. That's who I am now. What's the first step that they should take? What's the first mindset they should adopt?
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned it earlier. The first thing you can do, and it almost sounds like counterintuitive, right? But you're almost like where you feel like you should beat yourself up for doing this. Just first of all, recognize that the fact that I find it, I know it's wrong, is a good sign. It's a sign that I have iman, right? It's a sign that I care about my relationship with Allah. It's a sign that I care about the people in my life, right? That I want to fix this. So that's a good sign. Like, actually, like, recognize that and be grateful for that, right? Because when we lose that, when we think that actually I don't care, I genuinely am a bad person, I don't care about anyone, I'm going to carry on as I want to do. You know, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam literally said, you know, if words to the nearest effect, that if you have no shame, just do as you please. Essentially, that's not permission to do the bad thing, but it's basically saying that, look, if you don't recognize there's an issue, nobody can help you. So first of all, you recognize there's an issue, but you balance, you know, the level of harshness, right? Like and I always say, compassion is so helpful because again, it's the trait that Allah defines Himself by introducing Himself to us in every Quran bar one, right? And so we can take from that mercy and compassion is so necessary towards healing, right? That doesn't mean we give ourselves permission to just do as we please and just keep doing the act in question. It means that, look, we recognize there's an issue. I recognize that I'm more than the issue. I'm not defined by the issue. Now, this is like a subtle thing, right? It's, you know, like Abida mentioned earlier, in relationships, easier said than done, but for the spouse to recognize that I'm not the cause of my partner's behavior. Like we had a podcast not that long ago, probably about 6, 7, 8 months ago. Another type of podcast where I remember the person on there said he used to be an addict, quite a hardcore addict, and he said, look, it doesn't make sense for my wife to blame herself because I was an addict before I met her. So how can she blame herself, right? And I remember when I heard that, I thought, yeah, that's a really powerful just perspective to lift blame off of the other partner. But yeah, I would say first and foremost, you're not only an addict, right? You're a person with great potential that Allah's created, and you happen to have developed this addictive quality, right? But just like you have many other qualities, right? You can, which you've gained in your life, you've learned, you've adopted these qualities. You can get to a place where you can empower yourself through hard work. That's the thing. It does take work and commitment. You need to recognize the issue and be committed to wanting to improve your life and see the benefits of what it would be like to live a life without the addiction. But having these mindsets in self is a kinder approach, right, that actually facilitates greater change.
Can I just add, Imran, that in terms of when we think about compassion, there's a difference between having compassion and then having self-pity, because sometimes we can swing between being really hard and harsh on ourselves, like really putting ourselves down and having a lot of shame and negativity. And the other extreme would be to constantly feel sorry for ourselves. So when we have self-pity, that is a very debilitating emotion. Whereas compassion has positive connotations. And I think people kind of sway between really being negative and harsh. And then from there on, you feel really sorry, like you're the victim and there's no hope for you and people are everybody's fault. So then when we kind of really place responsibility externally to our situation, our work situation, our relationship or so, whatever, then there's no inner agency. So in terms of the way we approach is that we face our problem and then we fix it. In between facing and the fixing, obviously there are resources, there are people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put in our path to facilitate. But the inner kind of tawfiq and the ability to change things, it has to come from within, because you can't really force people to change. So it has to be the resiliency, the kind of ownership has to come from within. And the other thing is that kind of really thinking about what you said about the spouses, kind of the relational thing, is that the 3 C's that I often say to people is that to the wife or the spouse is that you have not created this problem, so you can't cure this, and you cannot you cannot control it. So sometimes it's like micromanaging, trying to take the phone away, the laptop away, policing and all that. That does not work, because it really is very draining and difficult. So the responsibility has to go back to the person who has the issue, and they have to take ownership. If they don't take ownership, unfortunately, there's nothing that can be done. And that's probably one of the things in the first session, we assess that whether the person is in the right place where they want to take ownership and they want to change something. Otherwise, it's not. And that's Allah says that if you don't want to change your situation, nobody can change your situation.
Oh, Dr. Nasser, you're on mute.
Thank you, Imran. I've just want to summarize what the both of you have just said there. And a word, Sister Abida, I heard you use earlier when you made that distinction about not being too harsh on yourself, but not being so falling into self-pity. And you used the word hope because it distinguishes the both. You're not, I'm a terrible person, I'm not going to get better, and so on. No, you can, and you've got to be kind to yourself and be hopeful. But you're not so self-pity. Oh, there's nothing I can do. I'm too weak. I'm a victim. Because again, you're being hopeless. And we've got to remember Allah is hope. And that analogy that both of you have used is just it is going to take some effort. Recognition and effort seem to be the 2 beginning ingredients, if you like, to get somebody healing and moving. Now, Imran is going to kindly share the details of the workshop. And please do visit Sister Abida's Amana Counseling. But I wanted to just finish because I apologize to our listeners. I just have to leave for another engagement. But the last 10, 15 minutes or so, we were going to take any questions. And also, Imran and Sister Abida were going to leave us a few tips and strategies. This isn't something that's going to be fixed overnight. And you need to recognize that. To get addicted did not happen overnight. A person who took that first drink of alcohol or watched that first explicit content didn't have a urge or a sudden need for it the next day. It was a repetitive behavior that started to cause implications and real neurochemical changes in the brain. And to get better and to heal needs those basic ingredients: hopefulness and a little bit of effort. Recognize, be hopeful in Allah, and just put a bit of effort in. But know that the journey out of your addiction will be the same journey that got you into the addiction. Slow, repetitive changes, and be kind to yourself. Listeners, thank you. I'm going to pass you over to Brother Imran. Sister Abida, thank you very much. And I'll touch base with you guys soon.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Nasser. So if people can bear with my freezing camera, we'll continue this quite rich conversation, right? And I think what Dr. Nasser just sort of touched upon is that these sort of, and what resonated with me is these small but consistent changes, this effort, this desire to change, to know that you can, because Allah never presented us with impossible problems, right? The world is changing. The world is heading towards, sometimes the scary way I think about it is with access to current levels of technology, the amount of fitna, things that we, are harmful for us that we can access now, we're seeing and we're exposed to more than our parents would have been exposed to in their entire lifetimes. We can probably get access to that in the space of like 10 minutes or an hour. We physically would have seen more than our parents have ever seen in their whole generation. This is quite scary. And if we think about the generation that's coming, next, like if any of us have children, it's a really scary place to be, but it's not without hope, right? It's when Allah sort of, and I often think, Sister Abida, like when Allah tells us, to lower our gaze, right? Like it's not that we can't do it. Allah doesn't set us impossible challenges, but you need the support, and you need the belief that A, you have the potential to do it, and B, you need sometimes a support mechanism to walk you through it, right? And that's where both of us as therapists, that's what the job of a therapist is, that we support. But ultimately the work is with the individual. The therapist doesn't click their fingers, do anything magic or anything like that. It's the commitment of the individual, right? It's the willingness to change, the belief that they are able to change. Sometimes success stories as well are quite helpful as well, Sister Abida. And actually, I'm just having a look at the comments. So I'll just so I'm just freezing, but
while you do,
yeah.
I think while you look at the comments, I suppose one of the things that I was thinking that might be useful for our participants and listeners is to think about a framework in terms of interventions and recovery. So depending on where people are, what their accessibility is, what is on offer, because not everybody, and that's why it's important to recognize that everybody will need something slightly different. So in my experience, especially when we're thinking about pornography, first thing that I often say to people is that we have to stop accessibility. So that means that people have to, whether if they're using a smartphone, many of my clients have to go from smartphones to brick phones, for instance, which is a big sacrifice because people are not used to not having smartphones. So it's kind of really making informed, good choices. The use of filters, for instance, is something that very early on in the session, I would say to people that you need to now think about how do you block the content, because you can't really say you're quitting smoking and then you walk around with your cigarette pack in your pocket. That's not going to work. So these are kind of starting point with certain strategies, and then also becoming quite aware of what is triggering for the person, for instance. And triggers are those those emotions or those situations where you know that if this happens, the logical or the predictable response is going to that people will go and find content that they don't want to. So sorry, I was just covering for you while you were looking at the
yeah,
comments.
no, it's again, thanks, Sister Abida. It's again really important there. I think what I was thinking about with particularly when you said almost like cutting the means, right? It's like making that first step. You recognize you have an issue. You're willing to do something that you might tell yourself feels impossible, like the narrative. Again, remember that inner narrative. We sometimes build that up for ourselves, and we'll sometimes be surprised what we're capable of doing and the effects it has when we actually engage with it. So, for example, for those that are severely affected, making that switch to a dumb phone, you'd be surprised. Just it's almost like the effect of detoxifying, right? Like Dr. Nasser mentioned just before he dropped off, that you didn't become an addict as soon as you popped out into this world, right? Like, as in it gradually, and even the first time a person might have seen pornography, they didn't suddenly decide that I'm going to be addicted to this for the rest of my life. There might have been a shock factor. It might have taken a few attempts, like with any addiction, right? Smoking, drugs, alcohol, etc. It's usually not the first hit. And so just by likewise, the solution lies in sort of making those gradual changes to detoxify, to make the effort to cut the means. Allah loves those deeds that are small and consistent. Shaitan's the one who'll try and convince us that you got to cut everything all at once, right? And we've literally just gone through, we may have friends and family who've just gone to Hajj, right? The holy days of the Hijjah have just passed us. There will be many people on that journey of a lifetime who are hoping that that's it. That's what will bring them out of their addiction. That will solve it. Allah will, they've geared all their financial resources, their time off work, etc., towards making this journey of a lifetime. Hopefully, they'll make dua, it's accepted, and they come back and they'll be squeaky clean. But they may be disappointed to find actually what happened. Like, why didn't I change? And the thing is it's the Prophet ﷺ taught us in the most simple of teachings that to tie our camels and have faith in Allah, right? So to do our bit, essentially, do your bit and have faith in Allah. Both of those things go hand in hand. And whenever you do too much of one, Allah will gently sort of course correct you to recognize that actually, look, get the balance right. Yeah. So don't just fully rely on yourself and ignore Allah completely, because that's not the way to do it. Don't just fully rely on Allah and just expect that you're just going to kick back and somehow wake up and be magically cured, right? But do a bit of both. So that's what really came up for me when you were just sharing those really pertinent examples, Sister Rabina.
I was also thinking that in terms of so people will wake up and that's the cycle that we see, that the minute somebody slips or relapses, they feel the surge of guilt and embarrassment and shame, and they're so distorted that they make that intention that I'm never going to do this again. So, and while they're making that decision, they actually the tawbah is very sincere. There's no doubt that they don't mean it. So they genuinely mean it, that they don't want to go back to the sinning or whatever the problem again. But white knuckling alone doesn't help. So if there are no interventions, then unfortunately, when people are overwhelmed, or they go back to their coping strategy. So in terms of kind of really thinking that unless there is some framework, so the brain is dependent, if we kind of simplify it, the brain is dependent on dopamine. So if you remove dopamine and you're not really giving the brain any other coping strategies, so when they need to manage, when there's cortisol, when they're really stressed out, so their go-to thing, which their neural pathways are dependent on, is going towards dopamine, and their chosen way of getting dopamine is watching pornography. So if we haven't really embedded other avenues, for instance, other ways of doing things like physical activity, having a friendship group, going to the masjid, socializing, finding breathing exercises, other things. If we don't really have a toolkit, then we are really setting ourselves up for disappointment and failure, because you can't just take something away and not replace it. So I think going back to the start is that there has to be compassion, that we have to help our bodies and our kind of dependent brain. And helping would come by having a toolkit, really, inshallah, rather than just saying that we white knuckle a problem, because white knuckling never works.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to bring in now a question from the audience. So Jazakallah khair. I'm just going to pop it up. So it says here, with an addiction, should one delay marriage and deal with the addiction first before getting married? Let's say they're trying and putting the effort in to stop. So Sister Bina, I'm curious on your take, particularly anyone, obviously not sharing specific examples, but where you've come across cases in your client load of individuals that prior to marriage, right, they're dealing with this. Very common, right? You're not alone. Thank you for asking the brave question. So what would you advise to someone in this situation? should they,
Jazakallah khair. And this is a very common presentation, by the way. A lot of people feel that they don't understand the addiction element. They feel that they have high libido. They feel that if they are in a halal relationship, they use marriage as a way of kind of really thinking that they will come away from pornography. But unfortunately, we realize that the dependency remains. And within weeks, they realize, well, actually, it's very different. So the intimacy that they have with their spouses is just very different from this dependency element. So that's my advice to anybody who's struggling, is to make sure that they manage their addiction, they get over it, and then go for a relationship. Because these are two separate things. To recognize that pornography use has nothing to do with our libidos or our sexual desire. It could be a trauma response. It could be an issue of compulsivity or whatever, but it's nothing to do with libido. I think we need to make that distinction.
Yeah, Barakallahu Feek. And just to add to that as well, look, it's not a message of despair either. Like, again, just look at the self-narratives we hold. Sometimes a person might think, oh, I don't think I can ever get over this. So does that mean I'm never going to get married, right? That's not what we're saying. We're saying that, look, take steps, because take steps to take control of your life, right? Make small steps. Like Sister Abida mentioned, there's techniques. There's if you're quite sort of deeply affective and you need therapeutic support, that's available, right? But or if you need self strategies to manage it, but take steps towards it, because just relying on the idea of marriage itself, that will be the sudden fix. It's easier, for someone who's not married, you don't know what that's like. But also know that it is a responsibility, right? Like as in another person is coming into your life. So it's a bit of a gamble to sort of pin it on that individual and hope that he or she will fix this. But at the same time, we're not saying that means just you're forbidden from, you need to judge your situation, take appropriate steps towards getting some degree of progress, right? Like as in, and you notice through doing this, because it's coming from a sincere place. You don't want to hurt another person. You want to obey the command of Allah. So never doubt that Allah will support you in that, right? Because you're trying to do something to fulfill His rights, your spouse's rights. So Allah will support you in that, and you will see that the type of person that comes out of that process, and it's also a lifelong journey as well, isn't it, Sister Abida? I'm actually curious on that aspect of it with regards to people in recovery. That is this something that needs to be managed constantly? Is that a message of despair as well? Like, I'm gonna, if I have this, I'm gonna have to deal with it my whole life. Like, what do you say to people in that space as well?
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for asking that question, Imran, because a lot of people worry about, they think, when will I be recovered? So the concept is that, and that's not just for somebody who has addiction. I think in a way, spiritually speaking, we all are addicted to this or that or whatever. So in some ways, whether we are therapists or parents or whatever, everybody has stuff that they need to work on and bring balance. So in one way, all of us have some level of addiction to this or that, right? So, and in terms of recovery, with everything that is spiritually problematic, we are in recovery for life. That's all of us. Like, we always constantly struggling with our nafs. So and that's the tightrope that as Muslims, we know that this dunya is a test. So that I think mindset is positive, rather than thinking, okay, so now that I'm in recovery, will I be in recovery for life? So for instance, with alcoholics, we know that alcoholics will say they are alcoholics for life, in the sense that they cannot ever have a drop of alcohol because there is that risk of relapse. I think the same goes with any addiction, because, and there is khair in that, because once we know that pornography is not good for us, why would we want pornography ever to be in our life, right? And that's not for people who have addiction. Well, actually, the principle is that it's just as harmful for your eyes and my eyes, you know. So the reality is that we all have to be careful, because it has repercussions. So, but the hopeful thing is, which I notice, is that when people work through their recovery, Imran, the beautiful thing is that their hearts and their souls, you know, once you replenish and you do the work, the inner work, the desire and the need changes, and they people have more dimensions and more beautiful things in their life that they want to focus on and enrich themselves with.
Wow. Yeah, I just wanted to just pick up on a couple of things you said there, Sister Abida. So like on on the point of, like, you know, a lifelong journey as well, I almost see it as like this is again a bit of a reframe, right? But almost like lifelong opportunities to get it right. Yeah. To earn the reward of Allah, because each opportunity you're presented with as you progress on your recovery journey, you build that resilience. You're able, there'll be times where you slip, and that's okay, right? To hold that in kindness, to not be so hard on yourself that that you paralyze yourself into being able to progress any further. But the opportunities that present themselves, where you make the conscious decision, because you're focused on your recovery, that I don't want to engage with this opportunity to view porn, or to, if I notice this on a movie I'm watching, or whatever form or concept, or, you know, this opportunity to engage in risky behavior, go to this place or that place, that imagine the you know, you have the opportunity to do it. And I often think of this concept that is you don't really miss something if you've never tried it. So so let me explain this. I often used to get asked by non-Muslim colleagues, like, how did you manage at uni? Like, you never drank. Oh my God, like, how did you get through uni, right? And I often thought, well, you know, like, I never tried it, so it's like I don't really know what I was missing, right? So it's almost easy, right? I kind of don't even have to think twice about it, right? But for someone who has tried it and knows it's harmful, and then makes the conscious decision, and because they've worked on themselves, they've built that resilience, this is how I'm caveating it, that you make the choice to avoid engaging with that. Imagine the amount of reward that person gets, because they know what it's like and they know the hit that they can get from it, but they've chosen to make a healthier, a more wholesome choice for them and how they want to live their lives, right? And then other things can spawn from that, right? As in your appreciation of life, your ability to appreciate true beauty, you know, or your ability to engage in, like, a healthy, holistic relationship with one's spouse, right? Like, as in all aspects of the word, right? Like, because you've basically unlocked the keys to it, which is how Allah intended for it to be, really. Like, Allah intended for us to experience the blessings and the halal of this earth in a way that, you know, that nourishes us, right? And you know, the Prophet ﷺ, Islam is one of the religions that actively encourages healthy sexuality, right? But when others have sort of commandeered it, almost sort of holding it to ransom, it's on our job to kind of reclaim it, but also to recognize, like Sister Abida, like you mentioned, that it's not always just about sex drive or this, that, and the other. Often, again, with deep introspection, you can find that what are you looking for in those times that you feel like you need to, you know, open up your favorite website or whatever. What is it really like? And you might find, I have a sort of a model I came up with. I call it the stabbed model. Are you stressed, tired, angry, bored, or depressed? There's other acronyms like HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Whatever it is, you may find that actually it's actually stemming, my initial urge is stemming from possibly one of those factors initially. Obviously, where a habit has been naturalized over a long time, it may be sort of deeper rooted. But also just kind of recognize that, okay, that's one aspect. At a deeper level, what are you really seeking? You're seeking, like, love. You're seeking safety. you're seeking, you want to do something that makes you feel better, but you're seeking it from the wrong sources, right? And ultimately, our true source of peace is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And I'm not saying that lightly. I'm not saying the sort of religious spiel, which is turn to Allah and your problems will be fixed. But often disconnection from Allah, I genuinely believe, leaves us in a very, very bad place. We're not meant to be disconnected from Allah. So just working on the things that Allah advises us, because Allah wants it, but because He knows that this is how we're made and this is what's good for us, that if we avoid these things and if we engage with these things, we'll be able to live that healthy, holistic life that Allah wants us to live, so that we can find our way back to Him in the Akhirah and to enjoy that sort of eternal bliss, inshallah. So I'm not painting that lightly. I'm saying that genuinely. Like it's a real state to access. It's a real way to engage with life. That can be, but it requires commitment and steps, baby steps, right? With regards to being willing to engage in recovery.
Absolutely. Jazakallah khair.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, so we have just a bit more time. There is one question that's if I can pop up, just having a look here. Sorry, that was one that we had previously. So I'll pose this to you, Sister Abida, if we may. How can you help someone who's so far gone that they can't even hold down their job or their relationship due to the addiction? So it's gone so far that they, like we mentioned earlier, that they can't get out of bed, or they just can't hold down. So where their earning capability is severely detrimented. What do you recommend for someone at that stage in their addiction?
So, like I said, with all addictions, the key thing when we look at addiction is that addiction is actually the behavior could be any behavior. As therapists, we look at what is underneath that. So what else is going on for that person? So if they cannot hold a job, or they're really, so is there depression, is there anxiety, what else is happening? So I think compassion and investing in their recovery, in the sense that making sure that if they need an intervention, whether they need to go to the GP, whether they need medication, because like I said, the presentation at the top is something else. That can be dealt with once we start from understanding what is underneath the behavior, really. So that's the key thing. Now, in terms of we were talking about success stories and do people ever recover? So subhanallah, I have recently worked with somebody who kind of lost their teens and maybe a chunk of their 20s, a big part of their 20s, through addiction. And when they worked on their recovery, subhanallah, now they are in their late 30s, mashallah, and you will be surprised. It sounds like a film story, Imran, like it's a Hollywood thing, a Bollywood thing, or whatever, mashallah. They are a millionaire person, and they're doing a lot of stuff in the community, right? So obviously there is a potential and possibility for everybody, and that's the reality. Obviously, when people are in a dark place, it's darkness, all that you can see. But as we know that every winter has a spring, every night has a dawn. So sometimes people around the addict, we have to be the hope that they can't see at the time. So finding help is the first thing, and there's always help on offer, really, whether it's going to the GP, whether it's finding a mental health intervention, whether it's medication, but there's always help available, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Sister Abida. And actually, I just second that. Look, sometimes it's about hearing those success stories, right? Like, as in, can feel like it's out of the movies, but it just shows you that it is possible. So for people that are really far gone, that look, those that were willing to accept that they had an issue, reached out for the help, will put their own effort into, they get what they put into it, right? So they're committed to fixing themselves, right? To being as Allah created us to be, that sort of that fitra, which is so heavily damaged, right, through exposure to things like pornography and other things that Islam advises, tells us to avoid, right? That actually, when you hear about people who have seen the light at the end of the tunnel and they've come through the tunnel, and they're, and I know because I worked alongside Sister Abida to deliver one of these workshops previously, that there absolutely are success stories, and it's incredible. People from the darkest of like as in places, you think that I can't believe this person is in this situation. I thought I had it bad, but this person, wow. And yet to hear that person has come through, and Sister Abida's seen it with her own eyes, right, through her actual client work. It's incredible, right? It is genuinely a message of hope. And it's not just something, it's not like an upsell or anything like that. It really is very much within reach, right? But being brave enough, the first step, they say, with any type of issue or problem or addiction, is to admit that it is a problem, right? It's having this impact on my life, and I need to do something about it. We're in a society at the moment where we're told that don't worry about it. It's normal. It's and as it slowly crept into our lives, like through. I remember it was like when broadband was introduced. Like we left dial-up internet. I remember thinking, wow, like the amount of exposure to like all sorts of stuff on the net is just going to increase rapidly, and it only happened, right? We then got the advent of smartphones, and now, like I mentioned, AI. I'm not being a technological Luddite at all. Like, I'm literally saying that the world is changing rapidly. People who want to profit off of that are doing so, and in a way that, and it might feel like a war that we can't win, but you absolutely can, right? Because there's the support mechanisms out there, tried and tested paths, and I'm just going to pop it up now. But again, for those who are interested, we've run this course previously with Sister Abida earlier this year, and we're doing it again this year in London. So end of this month, actually, in a couple of weeks. If any of this resonates with you, the course itself will be a bit wider reaching. Today we've touched on pornography addiction, because ultimately that is probably one of the most common and virulent, let's say, like as Sister Abida said, it's probably one of the most damaging addictions out there, and that it's sort of, if it's almost like a part of the furniture, right? It kind of, it's there. It kind of has made a case for it to be there, and it's just that sort of ticking time bomb that's waiting to go off. Many people are struggling with it. You're not alone if you're watching this and you feel that you are. But people may be suffering from other addictions as well. And we have a workshop where at Wiselife Academy, like we say, we're geared towards providing practical solutions, strategies to support you with any specialist support that you may be engaging, or you may not be aware of what is available to you. So we try to address people's genuine day-to-day needs, right? What might be holding them back in their family life, in their relationships, in their work promotions, because they feel beholden to these addictions. But there is another way. So look, this isn't a plug. Neither Sister Abida nor myself nor Dr. Nasser, we don't take a fee from doing this stuff. We're doing it, alhamdulillah, like through our own work, like we're able to sustain ourselves. But the whole ethos of Wiselife is we're trying to give back from what we do. May Allah, improve us in our ability to do that, to be honest, right? Because it's such a challenge reaching people who need it, right? And if we can do anything to help alleviate some of the pain, that's what we're trying to do. This is priced at 25 quid because it's not out there to make money. It's just covering just the costs of that we to put this together. And hopefully it's not priced out enough that someone might feel like I can't afford it. But for those who may not be in London, look, Wiselife Academy, we try to run sort of regular sort of online sessions as well. If you've attended one of our courses, we have a weekly community call that we run, and we'll be looking to do more courses across the country and other parts of the world as well. I know we have a global audience that may be tuning in, and we do have initiatives that we run outside of the UK as well. So please get in touch. We have an email address if anyone's interested. I'll put it in the chat. It's hello@wiselifeacademy.com. hello at wiselifeacademy.com. So if you just reach out to us, any type of issues you're going through, challenges, themes that may have come up on this call where you may benefit from being signposted. If you're interested to know more about Sister Abida's work, Namana Counseling, which is specifically geared towards this, we're more than happy to signpost you to the right support mechanisms. So reach out to us. You can you're more than welcome there. I think we have let's see if I've got another slide that just pops it up. There we go. That's our socials. So keep in touch. You have the YouTube channel, you have our email address I just shared, and we're available. Our events are on Eventbrite and advertise on Instagram as well. Jazakallah khair. Sister Abida, any final words you wanted to add there?
Jazakallah khair, Imran. I think in the end, all I would like to say is for anybody who has any type of addiction, please don't suffer in silence. Face it and fix it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us that there is absolutely nothing on this earth apart from death that we cannot work through, inshallah. So I would leave you with that, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Really, really appreciate your wisdom, insights, and time, Sister Abida. So may Allah enable all of us to have success, to achieve our potentials, inshallah, and to seek His pleasure in this life and the next. Subhanaka rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin. Alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Jazakallah khair, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.